Episode 38, Dreams, Doubt, and Dripping Clocks, The Once and Future Present, an AP European History podcast by Hammer History Productions. Hey everyone, it's Casey. Today we're finally putting together a bunch of threads we've mentioned in the last few episodes. The wild new art movements from Impressionism all the way to Surrealism, the new scientific ideas that made people question everything, and the beginnings of existentialism. So basically, why the early 1900s felt like the universe itself had gotten weird. And of course, I'm here with Dr. Morgan. Hi, Dr. Morgan.
Hi, Casey. Hi, everyone. Today, we're in that age of anxiety after the First World War. Politically and economically, people had just watched supposedly rational, civilized states use industrial technology to slaughter each other. At the same time, scientists and philosophers were telling them that time and space are relative, the atom can blow up a city, and the human mind isn't even rational at its core. All of that fed into new art, new literature, and new ways of thinking about meaning.
So, cheerful episode, love that. We also have Professor Theo back with us. Hi, Professor Theo.
Hey, Casey. I'm excited for this one. From the social and intellectual side, this is the moment when Europeans start asking, if old certainties are gone, about God, about progress, about reason, how do we live? How do we act? That's where existentialism comes in, and it's also the mood you feel in a lot of modern art and literature.
And because we're talking art movements, of course we had to bring back our favorite art historian. Welcome back, Dr. Romano.
Thanks, Casey. Hi, everyone. I'm here to help us walk through the visual side, how painting, sculpture, design, and even architecture moved from let's paint what we see to let's paint dreams, feelings, and chaos.
Perfect. Let's start with that art timeline. I know we already talked about earlier movements in other episodes, but can we do a quick recap? Like, how do we get from normal-looking paintings to melting clocks and Dada nonsense poems?
Great place to start. So for several centuries, Western art had focused on realistic, detailed representations of the world, religious scenes, kings on horses, big history paintings. In the late 1800s, Impressionism starts to break that. In Paris in the 1870s, artists like Claude Monet, Edgar Degas, and Mary Cassatt paint everyday scenes. But they're more interested in how light and color feel in a moment than in precise detail.
Okay, so quick vocab check. Impressionism is trying to capture a sensory impression instead of a perfect photograph?
Exactly, Casey. Impressionists look at a haystack at sunset or dancers practicing in a studio and ask, what colors, what blur of light and shadow, what overall mood am I experiencing right now? Monet's haystacks or Degas' ballerinas look a bit fuzzy up close, but they feel alive. Visible brushstrokes and quick color impressions move painting toward a more modern, less detailed style. And it's funny that you should mention photographs, as Impressionist painters were developing their new approach, partially, in response to the new technology of their time period, photography.
And the subjects matter too. Instead of kings or biblical heroes, you get workers in the fields, women in a theatre, people at a train station. It reflects a modern, urban, middle-class world, people living everyday lives in an industrial society.
So, Impressionism is like, let's paint what ordinary life feels like, not just big fancy moments.
Exactly. Then you get post-impressionists and expressionists, artists like Vincent van Gogh and Edvard Munch, who use bold colors, distortion, and dramatic brushstrokes to convey intense emotion rather than realism.
So that's where the swirly, starry skies and intense emotional vibes show up.
Right. And then after 1900, you get a true explosion of avant-garde movements. In 1907, Pablo Picasso and others in Paris developed Cubism, breaking objects into geometric shapes, zigzagging lines, sharp angles. A face might be shown from the front and the side at the same time. It's like reality has been shattered and reassembled as overlapping planes.
I remember seeing a Cubist painting and thinking, this looks like a broken mirror made into art.
That's a great description. Cubism is analytical. It says, what if we show all the perspectives at once? It fits a world where people feel reality isn't as simple or stable as it once seemed.
And right around then, Filippo Tommaso Marinetti and the futurists in Italy are shouting about speed, machines, and violence. They think the old culture can't handle cars, planes, radios, and the rush of modern life, so they want to destroy the past and glorify motion and energy.
So, to recap, Impressionism leads to Post-Impressionism and Expressionism, which in turn leads to Cubism and Futurism. And everything's getting more experimental, more abstract, and honestly more confusing for my brain.
That confusion is part of the point. These artists are saying, the old ways of seeing don't work anymore. And then the First World War hits, and things get even more radical.
Okay, this is where we get Dada, right? The super weird movement. What is Dadaism exactly?
Dadaism is born in 1916 in Zurich, Switzerland, in the middle of World War I. A group of international artists and intellectuals, people like Hugo Ball, look at the horror and absurdity of the war and say, if this is what civilization and reason lead to, then everything is nonsense. Dada attacks all familiar standards of art and behavior, and deliberately delights in outrageous anti-art behavior.
Anti-art? Like art that's not trying to be beautiful?
Exactly. Dadaists recited nonsense poems, made random collages, and put everyday objects in galleries just to shock people. One of the most famous examples is Marcel Duchamp's Fountain, a porcelain urinal presented as a sculpture and signed with a pseudonym. Duchamp's point was simple, but revolutionary. If an artist declares an object to be art, the entire definition of art is up for debate.
Okay, but can I ask a 21st century question? Is this basically the same energy as that banana taped to the wall that sold for a ridiculous amount of money?
Great connection, Casey. Yes, Maurizio Catalan's Comedian, the banana duct taped to a gallery wall, is absolutely working in the Dada tradition. It plays with the idea that the concept of art can matter more than the object and forces viewers to ask what they're really valuing. The banana, the joke, the artist's name, or the whole art market behind it.
This is also making me think of another piece I saw online, the one that says, "This is not a pipe." What's going on with that?
Ah, René Magritte's The Treachery of Images. It's a brilliant example of how artists in this era were questioning not just objects, but representation itself. Magritte paints a realistic image of a pipe, then writes, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe." This is not a pipe. He's reminding us that the painting isn't a pipe, it's only an image of one. It's a philosophical challenge. What is the relationship between an object and the words or images we use to describe it? That connects directly to the era's anxieties about meaning, truth, and perception.
And the Dadaists are reacting to the war. They've seen governments use rational planning and modern technology, machine guns, poison gas, to slaughter millions. That makes it hard to believe in progress, reason, or old moral systems. Dada turns that despair and anger into chaotic art.
Okay, now surrealism, that's the melting clocks and weird dreamscapes, right?
Yes. In the mid-1920s, some Dada artists shift into surrealism, drawing on Freud's ideas about dreams and the unconscious. Surrealists paint hyper-realistic but impossible scenes, melting clocks, floating objects, dreamlike landscapes, meant to explore the hidden mind.
So if Dada says life is nonsense, surrealism says, let's dive into our dreams and nightmares and paint that.
Exactly. Both movements reflect the same mood, a world where old values feel bankrupt, and where people feel anxiety and uncertainty about the future. But surrealism is more psychological, more interested in the inner mind.
Were these artists actually trying to change the world, or just being weird for fun?
Many were absolutely serious about changing the world. Dadaists, futurists, surrealists, they write manifestos attacking mainstream society and imagining a new, radical culture. Some join communist movements, others flirt with other political extremes. By the 1920s and 1930s, art and politics are tightly intertwined, and avant-garde artists often find themselves in conflict with rising dictatorships like Nazi Germany, which label modern art degenerate and drive many artists into exile.
So, when I see a surrealist painting, it's not just random weirdness. It's connected to war trauma, political crisis, and new ideas about the unconscious.
Exactly. The dripping clocks belong to that whole age of anxiety.
Before we jump into science and existentialism, can we quickly talk architecture and design? Because I've seen the word Bauhaus and I kind of thought it was just a furniture store.
Totally fair. In architecture, modernism means stripping away fancy decoration and designing buildings that fit industrial society. Early architects like Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright used steel and reinforced concrete to create simple open structures. Le Corbusier captured the idea with his famous line, "A house is a machine for living in." In 1919, Walter Gropius founded the Bauhaus, which merged fine and applied arts to create streamlined, functional designs, chairs, lamps, buildings, reflecting a world shaped by industry and efficiency.
Exactly. It's saying beauty can be found in clean lines, industrial materials, and mass production. And again, it fits a world where people are rethinking what progress and modern life should look like.
Okay, let's switch to science. You both keep saying science made people more anxious, which is funny because we usually think science makes things clearer. What changed?
For a long time, many Europeans believed in a Newtonian universe, like a giant, predictable machine. If you knew the position and speed of everything, you could, in theory, predict the future. That felt comforting. Then, in 1905, Albert Einstein publishes his theory of special relativity. He argues that time and space are not fixed, they're relative to the observer. Only the speed of light stays constant.
So, time doesn't tick the same for everyone?
Right? Imagine you're on a moving train and I'm standing on the platform. Events that seem simultaneous to you might not be simultaneous to me. Time and distance stretch and shrink depending on motion. That's a huge shift from the idea that there's one universal clock governing everything.
Okay, that's trippy.
It gets trippier. Einstein also shows that matter and energy are interchangeable. Think of the famous equation E equals mc squared, which means even a tiny bit of matter contains enormous potential energy. Later, scientists will use that idea to unlock nuclear fission and atomic bombs.
So, science is now saying space and time bend, and the atom can destroy a city. Comforting.
And then there's quantum mechanics. Physicists like Max Planck and Werner Heisenberg show that at the subatomic level, you can't know both the exact position and the exact momentum of a particle at the same time. That's the uncertainty principle. The more precisely you measure one, the less precisely you know the other.
So it's not just that we don't know. Reality itself is fuzzy?
Exactly. The old idea that the universe is perfectly predictable starts to crumble.
Is this where Schrodinger's cat comes in? I've heard the phrase, but never understood why a cat is both alive and dead.
Great question, Casey. Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment meant to show how strange quantum mechanics really is. In the quantum world, particles can exist in multiple states at once, what physicists call superposition. Schrödinger imagined a sealed box with a cat inside and a device that has a 50% chance of killing the cat. Until someone opens the box, the cat exists in a quantum state that is both alive and dead at the same time, what physicists call superposition. The whole point is to show how quantum mechanics challenges everyday logic without diving into unnecessary technical details.
So even a cat becomes a symbol of how uncertain the universe is?
Exactly. It's a playful way of showing that quantum mechanics breaks the rules of common sense and left many people feeling that reality itself was less stable than they'd believed.
So now our physics is telling us the universe is uncertain. Our art is breaking up reality into cubes or surreal dreams, and we haven't even talked about Freud or existentialism yet. Let's bring Freud into this. What's his deal again? Professor Theo. Sigmund Freud, an Austrian neurologist, developed psychoanalysis around 1900. He argued that people are driven by unconscious forces, instincts, memories, desires they don't fully understand. He described 3 parts of the self: the id, instinct, superego, conscience, and ego, the mediator. When these conflict, psychological tension results. His talking cure encouraged patients to uncover hidden thoughts through conversation and dream analysis. Freud's work challenged the Enlightenment belief in human rationality and added to the era's growing sense of uncertainty. So now we have physics says the universe is weird, and Freud says you are weird. Got it. Where does logical positivism fit into this? That phrase sounds like something you'd name a punk band.
Logical positivism is a school of thought that grows mainly in the English-speaking world. Philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein argue that philosophy should focus only on statements that can be logically proven or tested by science. If you can't verify something, like God exists or life has meaning, then they say those sentences are literally meaningless in a scientific sense.
So they're not just saying, we don't know if God exists. They're saying it's not even a valid question for philosophy.
Exactly. Wittgenstein famously ends one of his books with the line, "Of what one cannot speak, of that one must keep silent." In other words, if science and logic can't handle it, philosophy should back off. That really shrinks the space where reason can give comforting answers.
That actually makes me think back to Magrithe's treachery of images. Isn't he doing something similar, showing us that the words and symbols we use don't perfectly match the things they represent?
Exactly, Casey. Magritte is playing in the same conceptual sandbox as Wittgenstein. Both are asking, what do our words really describe? What happens when language breaks down or can't capture the truth? Magritte does it visually, painting a pipe and reminding us it's not a pipe, just an image. Wittgenstein does it philosophically, saying that if language can't fully grasp something, then we shouldn't pretend it can.
So, art and philosophy are basically teaming up to show people that meaning isn't as solid as they thought.
Right? And that collapse of certainty is a huge part of why this period feels so destabilized.
So now we've narrowed what counts as real knowledge and shown that both the universe and the human mind are unstable. No wonder people feel anxious. Okay, now the big one, existentialism. I know the textbook definition is something like a philosophy that stresses the meaninglessness of existence and the importance of the individual in searching for moral values in an uncertain world. But can we break that down in normal language?
That's a good textbook quote. Existentialism basically starts from the observation that many old certainties about God, progress, and reason seem broken. Existentialists say, yes, life has no built-in meaning. That's the meaninglessness of existence. But instead of giving up, they insist that individuals must create their own meaning through their choices and actions.
So it's life is meaningless, and therefore your choices matter even more.
Exactly. Modern existentialism grew in the 1920s with thinkers like Martin Heidegger, Karl Jaspers, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Simone de Beauvoir.
Sartre famously said existence precedes essence, meaning people define themselves through actions, not preset roles. Existentialists saw this freedom as both unsettling and empowering.
So, in a way, existentialism is like the philosophical version of what we've been seeing in art and science. No more guarantees, lots of uncertainty, but also new ways to think and act. What about religious responses? The textbook talked about Christian existentialists, right?
Yes. Some thinkers, often called Christian existentialists, accepted the same atmosphere of crisis, but argued that meaning could still come from God. Kierkegaard emphasized choosing belief despite uncertainty, calling it a leap of faith.
So even religion is being rethought in existential terms. You choose to believe, knowing you might never get logical certainty.
Exactly. Religion becomes another way to respond to the age of anxiety.
Let's connect this back to the art movements. How does all this anxiety and existentialism show up on the canvas or the page?
In visual art, you see it in several ways. Dada and Surrealism literally embody the idea that reality is unstable and that the unconscious mind is powerful. Surrealist paintings feel like visual Freudian dreams. Cubism and abstract art break objects into pieces, echoing the sense that the old, whole picture of reality has shattered. Futurism celebrates the speed and violence of modern life, almost as if the artists are leaning into the chaos.
So if I walk through a modern art museum, I'm basically walking through a gallery of, we don't trust the old world anymore.
That's one way to see it, yes.
In literature, modernism appears in the stream of consciousness style, where writers like Virginia Woolf and James Joyce present thoughts as they flow without a neat, linear storyline.
Exactly. Modernist literature, art, and philosophy are all trying to represent a world where old certainties about time, space, morality, identity have broken down.
And we should also remember the historical context. World War I has just happened, the Great Depression is coming, and authoritarian regimes are rising. So it's not like people are sitting around in calm times inventing anxiety for fun.
Right? The intellectual developments in Chapter 26, new physics, Freudian psychology, logical positivism, existentialism, and the cultural developments, modernism, functionalist architecture, Bauhaus, data, surrealism, are all part of what McKay calls opportunity and crisis in the age of modernity.
So, to sum up the vibe, physics says the universe is relative and uncertain. Freud says your own mind is irrational and partly hidden. Logical positivists say many big questions can't even be answered by reason. Existentialists say life has no built-in meaning, but you're responsible for creating one anyway. And artists turn all of that into paintings, films, buildings, and novels that look and feel totally different from anything in the 19th century. Did I miss anything major?
That's a great summary, Casey.
The one thing I'd add is that not everyone liked these changes. Many people rejected modern art and modern ideas, and some authoritarian regimes actively repressed them. So modernism is always controversial. And in our next episode, we'll dig into how that backlash against modern ideas helped some people embrace fascist movements in the 1920s and 1930s.
Right. Modernism is not just, yay, progress. It's also about conflict over what kind of world people want to build after such massive trauma. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop before my own brain melts like a surrealist clock. Today we looked at how art moved from Impressionism to Post-Impressionism, Expressionism, Cubism, Futurism, Dadaism, and Surrealism. We saw how modern architecture and the Bauhaus tried to redesign everyday life around functional industrial principles. And we connected that to new scientific ideas about relativity and the atom, Freudian psychology and the unconscious, logical positivism cutting down what counts as real knowledge, and existentialism's challenge and invitation to find meaning in an uncertain world. Next time, we'll keep going with the cultural side of the interwar period, looking even more closely at visual arts, literature, theater, and film, and how they responded to war, dictatorship, and mass culture. Dr. Morgan, Theo, Dr. Romano, thanks so much for helping untangle all of this.
Thanks, Casey.
Always a pleasure.
See you in the gallery next time.